this is the article that caught my attention, and I spoke to you about just yesterday because, it's one thing for me to be saying it, and I've certainly been getting into a lot of this, and I have a background in financial reporting, and specifically, actually, some of the most successful reporting I've done in my career actually dealt with terrorist financing. And so I've spent time sort of looking at the web of financial activity that is of concern to places like, say, the US Treasury Department. Well, it seems as though whatever Hunter and Joe and the Bidens were doing, it was certainly of decent concern to the government. I'm joined right now by Max Abrams, who's a professor of political science at Northeastern, forgive me, University in my backyard there in Massachusetts, Northeastern University. It is wonderful to have you here, Professor Abrams, the author of the article I just mentioned. And I'll let you explain really from the beginning, sir. You said it's possible that there could be compromat. What is compromat?
Well, thanks for having me on your show. I use the word compromat almost tongue in cheek. I'm kind of making fun of legacy media. And the reason I only heard of it during the Trump administration. Throughout the Trump presidency, we were told just constantly, there was a daily deluge of stories about how the Russians had all this compromat on President Trump. What exactly the compromat was often switched, from day to day, but the main compromat story during the Trump years was the P tape, right?
Mm-hmm.
That came out in the Steele dossier. Trump allegedly had traveled to Moscow and had some prostitutes
Oh,
pee
wow,
on
you're
him.
really getting into it.
Right,
Like,
right,
I don't even like to talk about it, but yeah,
right, yeah, right.
there were
So,
some
so
gory details
allegedly,
in there.
so
And I remember
allegedly,
BuzzFeed printing the whole
you
thing and me
remember,
looking at it, by the way, Professor Abrams, and saying, as a journalist, I'm looking at this going, this is like kind of strange. It feels like something I'd be reading in like Star Magazine or the National Enquirer, or maybe, oh, I don't know, an opposition research report. It didn't really feel like, Professor, something that you would see in terms of actual real intelligence research. I mean, it
well,
read
well,
in such a way that was like the cliffhanger.
yeah. I mean, we know now that it was completely made up. That it was just like the journalists, like weird, like perversions and desire to hurt Donald Trump. But it was in the Steele dossier, which was part of Hillary Clinton's so-called opposition research. And the P-tape story and the compromise allegations might seem silly, and in a way, it really is quite silly, but it formed an important part of the Democrat narrative. And compromat has Russian origins, and it basically means compromising material, which you could use to embarrass a public figure, especially a politician, in order to exert influence. Just by the fact that you have the compromat, you can limit the range of choices, of behaviors of the politician because they don't want to be exposed, right? And so throughout the Trump presidency, we were told that this compromat is what made Trump a Russian agent, a Russian asset. He was constantly accused of being treasonous, of being pro Putin, and it was of course totally baseless. So I asked the question in this Newsweek piece, well, is it possible that Ukrainian officials have real compromat, not made up compromat, not weird compromat, but
Weird,
actual
crazy,
compromat?
perverted compromise, uh-huh.
Yeah, on the
Which is
current
actual
president.
financial stuff.
Right. And so they're basic, it's very complicated, all of the allegations swirling around about Biden and Ukraine, but I like to think of it conceptually in terms of two main arguments. The first argument is that Joe Biden, as vice president, engaged in influence peddling. He was in cahoots with his son, Hunter Biden, the corrupt energy company Burisma was paying Hunter because of Joe's access as as Obama's VP. So
Right.
that
And
that
just to stop you there, because again, for everybody watching right now, we have a lot of people tuning into this live broadcast with the professor from Northeastern University who just authored a piece suggesting, hey, maybe we ought to look at perhaps the real stuff that could be going on. Again, just allegations at this point, but worthy of investigating. I just want to share with these viewers before you get to that, because he's talking about the $83,000 that was being paid to Devin Archer and to Hunter Biden, both so that they could consult for Burisma at a time when the vice president of the United States just happened to be the father of one of the guys that they brought on. So here's some video, everyone, of Devin Archer. This was the business partner of Hunter Biden, sitting down with Tucker Carlson just the other day at his cabin in Maine, apparently where all conservatives go. I'm just kidding. Anyway, here is Tucker Carlson and Devin Archer talking about that so-called access.
Did he have a sophisticated understanding of regulation, do you think?
I think that he led a team that had a sophisticated.
Okay, because I lived in Washington a long time around a lot of regulation. It's a very complex area.
Absolutely. I think you got to be an expert in knowing the guy, and he was the guy that was the expert in knowing the guy.
He was an expert in knowing the guy.
Right.
And who was the guy he knew?
Well, he knew a lot of people, but obviously there was some familiar, his brother, his father, some of his father's siblings. So he knew a lot of people. And obviously I know you're pointing to, the father being the key relationship.
Yeah, the father being the key relationship, Professor Abrams. So when you talk about the $83,000 a month that was getting paid to Hunter Biden, plus another 83 for his partner, plus, there's allegations of potentially a lot more. That's what you're saying is really possibly the compromising material, or just part of it?
that is a big part of it. So that's one sort of current, which is just the corruption, the fact that Burisma seems to have been paying the Bidens not just like tens of thousands of dollars, but millions of dollars. So it's reported that Burisma paid the Bidens $11 million. So that's
So
really,
that's what, if that's true. Now, we say that it's been reported. And by the way, I want to also just mention that there is, according to a Fox News digital article, a source that told someone at Fox News Digital that was related somehow to the FBI, that the FBI had learned from one of their sources. Now, by the way, you got to take all the sources at the FBI with a grain of salt, right? Because this is the same team that came up with that so-called dossier on Trump, but didn't bother to follow through and actually investigate it. Instead, they somehow thought it was worthwhile to, wiretap the Trump campaign's phones. Anyway, they somehow got information that $5 million was paid allegedly to Joe Biden. We don't know what's true effectively and not true, but I'm hearing these numbers. I'm looking, by the way, at the bank reports. I'm looking at 170, for goodness sake, SARS, suspicious activity reports. And Professor, I'm just like, I don't know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and somebody ought to be looking into this.
yeah, they are. The problem for the Bidens is that it's not just allegations. Like if you were, following this story and then you stopped following it over the past few years and even few months and even few weeks, you wouldn't really know what was going on. I think that the Bidens are in trouble now for a reason, and that's because a lot of information is coming out, and it's not just allegations that could be easily dismissed.
Hey everyone, Trish Regan here. If you enjoyed that clip, please do me the favor of subscribing to the channel. Just hit that little subscribe button right over there. Did I do that right? Not quite, but you know where it is. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so that you get the alerts, and I'll see you back on the show.